Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mosi-Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello, and welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. This month we're kind of doing a special thing where we have we're going to have a bunch of guests on, and of course I had to talk to good friend of the show, Morgan Goldin, get him out here to do an episode. So Morgan, I'm going to have you kind of explain what this episode is going to be, because I think we're going to have our guests kind of like talk about why they chose what they chose and that type of thing. So I'm going to let you introduce it, but first, I just want to say thanks for coming on again, and I appreciate you being here with us, man.
Thank you for having me. Always a blast.
Yeah, of course. So what did you pick, and kind of why did you pick it as the idea for this episode?
For my guest spot, I figured since May is AAPI Heritage Month, I wanted to highlight some of the works that have come from the community. I mean, with the recent successes of The Farewell and Mirindis, I wanted to shine a light on works from the past couple of decades that show where we got to this point in representation for the community. Yeah,
man. And when you let me know that you wanted to do that, I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Something that maybe, I hopefully we can see a lot of other places doing similar things this month. But I was like, yeah, I definitely want to talk about this with you because you have always throughout, like since we were friends in high school, you've always been showing me new stuff and up to this week, still continuing to do so. Very cool stuff. So,
thank you for saying that, man.
You suggested 5 movies that we're gonna kind of talk about in a bit, and so we watched these movies leading up to this, and we'll talk about those. But I want to give you a couple minutes before we start talking about the films to kind of say anything that you want to say about the topic, or anything else that you want to add that you haven't already mentioned.
Yeah, sure. I feel like Asian American cinema is just at a very interesting point because it feels like within the last few years, it's at least been able to make a dent into a broader public consciousness because, growing up, there just was nothing there, like almost literally nothing there in terms of representation. Like I try to think of movies when I was a kid, even in high school, which is 20 years ago at this point, just what media would be out there. And you really saw nothing besides like either stereotypical portrayals or just completely erased from the conversation entirely. I mean, you have your actors. It's like, people were aware, obviously, of like Asians exist in this country, but like outside of like seeing a Jackie Chan movie or something like that, in terms of like just everyday, day-to-day encounters in society, there just wasn't anything to cater. Maybe like Lucy Liu on Ally McBeal, and that's like it in terms of 90s TV representation. Maybe Margaret Cho's All-American Girl, which lasted a season, and then that's it. But it's just been pretty stark. And then I feel like within the 21st century, it's been slowly able to make ground inroads in terms of like getting through to larger audiences, because there is a hunger out there. Like people, obviously everyone wants to see themselves represented on screen. It's like you feel visible, you feel validated, and artists are able to have that connection and really respond to audiences to be able to cater to make media that represents that. So yeah, I wanted to take some time to share some of the things I've been watching.
Absolutely, man. That's very well said. And I remember when we were going to school in high school, you would always show me these really cool, like we watched a lot of action movies and stuff back in the day. You'd always show me these really cool Asian action movies, but you're right, there wasn't like really any of the Asian American stuff out there that that kind of held the line up, in this country. And then, with these movies that you have here that we're going to talk about today, I guess it's been, like you said, it's been kind of slowly seeping into culture, and it's really cool to see a movie like, Minari, or, The Farewell from a couple years ago. Those types of movies really get the recognition that maybe some of these other ones should have as well. But yeah, so what do you say? Do you want to start where? I think we're going to do this. You mentioned you want to do it in reverse chronological, so we'll start with the newest ones and we'll work our way back to kind of the the proto origin of Asian American cinema, at least in our lifetimes here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, before we get started, I just want to make a quick note that pretty much most of these titles are available for streaming on a wide variety of platforms. It's just a quick Google search away, but yeah, they should be pretty accessible. So it's not like you even have to really hunt for these. So
most of them were free streaming in one place or another. So yeah, absolutely, very good point. And I'll try to put up in the liner notes where you can find them as well. So people can just see that and go straight there if they want to. And I guess,
before we get started, I wanted to pick a quick word before we get started on like the titles of these movies. I wanted to pick also kind of like a very eclectic sampling, like to show the wide range of like Asian American art pretty much. Because like these movies, none of them look like they were made by the same creator. They all have their own style, personality, tone, subject matter that they cover. So it's not just like one thing, because every marginalized group says this, that we are not a monolith. And I think each of these titles is like reflective of that. They could stand on their own and they have their own way of expressing themselves. And I really wanted to pick ones that like didn't feel too similar to either one. And I think once we get into it, you'll really see that reflected.
Yeah, you really did get a wide swath of like different types of films in here. I mean, there are a couple that have like some themes that go together, which I'll probably mention, when we get to them, but for sure, it's like a very, very different, they're each very much their own movie and very different from each other. So that's a very good point. Well met, sir. Okay, so let's talk about the first one. Do you want to introduce them, or do you want me to read them off? Here.
I can introduce it.
All right.
Okay, the first movie I wanted to talk about was from 2018. It is a documentary called Minding the Gap. Basically, Minding the Gap is from director Bing Liu, who has been making this movie since he was 14. He is a skateboarder, and he was just documenting him and his friends doing skating tricks. But then as he got older, he wanted to encompass a lot more into the movie. So it touches on themes like domestic abuse, class, race in this country. And I think he creates this like very, very vivid portrait of that from this town in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's a really, really powerful movie. I think I texted you when I was done watching. I was like, Jesus, this one's a heartbreaker. But like, it's really amazing how much he gets. Like, so when I watched this, I guess kind of a spoiler, or not a spoiler, but an explanation of what's going on. When I watched this, I thought that all these three main characters, himself, Bing Liu, and then what is it, Kire and Zach. I thought they were all like old friends, but it turns out that Bing didn't actually know any of these guys until he started like putting together the movie proper. Which I was like, at first I was like, and then I was like, that's really impressive that he got so much out of these two other guys, because they really open up to him.
Yeah, there's such like transparency and honesty in this movie. Like, he definitely established a relationship with them that they're able to open up that, because you get these like really unguarded moments. And, it's like a cliche to say in a documentary, you forget the camera's there after a while, but it's like, for the subjects that are talking, you really feel that. And they are so just like, they're vulnerable. There's like a vulnerability there that you really don't see even in other similarly themed documentaries.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Even when he's pulling these unflattering things out of them at some points, like, it's there's still, you feel a closeness between them and, between them.
Right.
Him as the documentarian and them as his subject, but they go like kind of deeper than that, it seems like. But yeah, very, very cool film. And like it weirdly, so I guess Bing Liu is, I think, around our age. Is that?
I think he's a little bit younger, but yeah, he's close. He's close.
And it kind of like him talking to some of the guys like reminded me of my friends who skateboarded like back in the day and stuff like that. But yeah, it's I love this. I love this movie, man. It was great. The only documentary on here, but I highly recommend that everybody check it out. It's worth your time for sure.
I mean, yeah, I know I usually come on this thing to rag on the Oscars, but the fact that this lost to something like Free Solo, when I was like, this is so much more just human and raw and open, as opposed to like some kind of like, athletic stunt. I mean, not to shit on Free Solo too much. Like, it's impressive fucking climbing El Capitan with like no gear. But something like this where he's been working on it since he was like 14. And you really get the sense like, first, all these kids use skateboarding as like their therapy to get away from like these really abusive households. And it's like their medicine. And then like you get the sense from the filmmaker Bing Liu himself that making a documentary is another form of like art therapy as a way to like help cope with the situation. And you really get to see like masculinity shaped through domestic violence and like the cycles perpetuated through one of the guys, Zach, where even when you find out that he's become an abuser, your first instinct isn't to like just automatically like, oh, you monster, and shut it off. Like you still maintain some level of understanding. Like the movie doesn't excuse his behavior, but you definitely come away with like a better sense of his psychology, and you genuinely hope that he is able to, get treatment and get better for him and the sake of his family.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. I saw pictures of them, at award shows and stuff, and they're all, hugging. So like clearly this didn't come out and completely break any bonds that they had, I guess, or whatever. Like, they're all, arm in arm, like, hanging out. But it is interesting. Hopefully you're right. Hopefully he could get help and figure out his situation a bit better and all that stuff. But yeah, man, this was it was kind of rough at points, but like very rough. I mean, like difficult for my heart to take.
Oh yeah,
but
it's a heartbreaker.
Yeah, but
it's so beautifully shot too. Like it's just some of the most gorgeous skate photography with like this classical music. So you have all these like contrasts of emotions going through it as well. It really shows you this like beauty and ugliness being like next to each other. Like I really dig it. And I mentioned it on my last appearance on the show about Bing Liu, but this was a hell of a calling card that A24 noticed. His next project, he's doing an adaptation of Ocean Vuong's memoir On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. And I see big things for this filmmaker. I hope to anyways, but yeah, this is a start of a really interesting career.
Yeah, I'm excited to check that out and everything else he's got going on from now until, whenever. Cool, man. So that's Minding the Gap. What's the next one on our list?
Next one, we go to 2017 Columbus. It is also a debut film. It's from this filmmaker, Kogonada, who got his start cutting video essays on YouTube and Vimeo. And he actually got noticed for that to the point where the Criterion Channel actually hired him to make some supplemental features for some of their movies. Basically, this is like a very, very simple, elegant, quiet movie, but just so like completely realized and fully lived in and authentic. It's basically about two characters. The biggest name in it is John Cho. He plays a man whose father is this like renowned architect professor who has a health crisis that he has to come back, or that John Cho has to come back into the town of Columbus to go tend to him. And while there, he meets this young girl who also is dealing with family crisis. Her name is, I'm blanking on her name, and I just watched it a couple days ago. Played by Haley Lou Richardson in an amazing performance.
Yeah. Casey is her name.
Casey.
Yeah.
Casey, thank you. And she has this passion for architecture. She's actually a fan of his father. And through that, they're able to get this like really precious tentative bond as they just go around this town. It turns out Columbus is kind of this like architectural mecca that I think most people in this country, and maybe even most people in Indiana, aren't even aware of. Like, you go there, you feel like it almost looks like it could be a setting for Twin Peaks, because you have this very like modernist, very striking sculptures and artwork all throughout the town. That's just the background that nobody seems to like really pay any mind. And the movie almost has kind of like a reverse Lost in Translation feel, because it's just about these two people kind of like getting to know each other through these unusual circumstances, but it really captures all that like awkward initial fumbling of like entering this new connection that they have. And I think it was just it just felt so real. Like, I know I mentioned when I did the Oscar broadcast for that year, one of my snubs was for Haley Lou Richardson, and she gives this performance that's not very showy, but it just feels so real and authentic. Like her like conversation patterns, her speech is just like all the ums. It feels just very like, you are there. It's like that's just how people talk. It doesn't feel like writerly or affected.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. This one was probably my favorite of all of them. It's just like my kind of like indie. It's got beautiful shots. If you're watching this, you see a shot behind me of
Oh yeah.
It's the cinematography is amazing.
It's one of the best, I think, of last decade. It's just so stark, just this like pictorial beauty. Like, most of the camera movement is so still, almost like a photograph. And I think he really wanted to capture like the trapped that these characters feel, because the camera barely moves. Like, when I rewatch it, I think in the whole movie, there's maybe only 10 shots where there's any kind of camera movement. It's usually just like a slow dolly left or right.
Yeah.
And when he does do movement, it's through like their relationship coming to a new understanding. So it's like he really chooses when to actually move the camera. But other than that, you get these like really like compositional like beauties almost of these buildings and the figures in them, just with the use of negative space. It's any frame could be a painting in it.
It's outrageous how like the scene with him and Parker Posey in the room with the mirrors. The only way you see them is through these mirrors on the wall. It's like that scene is outrageous. So good. The sound design in this is like there's multiple times where they just kind of, the camera cuts to something outside of where you would be able to hear the conversation, and the conversation just stops. You can't hear the conversation if you're not there.
Right.
Like, it's so good. Just
there's one, speaking of with that sound design, like there's one really impactful moment where they're outside this bank that's all glass, and Casey is giving this whole spiel about like the history behind it and the architect who created it. And then Jean Cho's character Jin goes like, "Why do you like this building?" And then she just starts reiterating the facts. It's like, "No, why do you like this building?" And then we cut to inside. We don't hear what she's saying, but the music slowly swells up, but you see her light up, and you see her passion really come through. And it's like, even though you don't hear what you're saying, the body language expresses it so perfectly. You don't need to hear what she's saying, because you feel it and you see it. And I think the fact that they're able to like show people this passionate about architecture, I was like, how many movies that are just specifically about architecture as a theme are there out there? Could tell the guy really did his research on it.
Yeah, and in scenes like that, like it's the acting really is amazing. But like in that same scene, you see John Cho reacting to her, Jin reacting to her, and like his eyes kind of lighting up when she finally starts saying something that's like real or whatever. The way that you feel. This movie is like, this movie is full of moments like that.
Right.
All the dialogue is great and like feels very, very natural, like you said before. Go
ahead.
I've been meaning to see this for since it came out. Really, I heard great things about it in 2017, and I just didn't get around to it. And I'm really glad that you put it on this list so I could finally watch it.
Oh, no problem. Is one of my favorites from the last decade. And rewatching it again, I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but I just think like I was watching it like in the wrong hands, all of this could be so trite and quirky. Like she walks a fine line between like a manic pixie dream girl. But I mean, the movie, the writer, he gives her like actual agency, backstory, motivation. She's not there to like make John Cho come alive again or anything like that. Like she's her own person. And like he's his own person too.
I was gonna say he is, but if anything, he's like he plays the more like he's there, like she's coming alive because she meets him, you know, like or both of them kind of like in the same way are experiencing that, you know.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, and like even the way like they shoot the town, like it could have been like this really just like, you know, Napoleon Dynamite-esque, like surreal, but it's so slice of life. It's so honest. It's so transparent again. It's really good. And the style of it too. Kogonada said he's been a big fan of this Japanese master from the 50s called Yasujiro Ozu, who also was really static in his cinematography. And he really underplayed the emotion. He didn't like need like a big score or anything to swell it up, but just let the actors be free to emote without like, you know, going over the top or anything like that. And you kind of like by underplaying it, it kind of like enhances it and lets you really feel it for yourself.
Yeah. Also, Rory Colton has a small part in this, and he's a fun little loser character.
He's someone that you know in your own life that everyone has that friend.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you like this, man. No, that's great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. All right, so that's Columbus. What's the next one on our list?
Next one is from 2009. It is called Children of Invention. And fun fact, my college ex has a small cameo in this movie.
So watch out for that.
Watch out for that. It's the 33rd minute and the 30th mark. She plays a potential customer. Anyways, we'll get more into it when we talk about it.
Fair enough. Yeah, so Children of Invention, I really enjoyed this one. The kids in this do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to because they have to carry part of it.
Right.
I'm getting a little echo. So Children of Invention, these kind of it's kind of the story of this mom who's trying to, you know, raise her kids. She's single.
Newly divorced.
Newly divorced. The dad's kind of out of the picture. But she's got to make some money, which she starts off like trying to sell products, and then she gets a job kind of selling real estate, or, you know, showing real estate. But she needs she's looking at these ways to make more money and, you know, kind of you know, provide for her kids pretty much. And she ends up getting involved in a scam, and just I mean, I don't want to call it hijinks ensue because it's not quite that kind of movie, but kind of hijinks ensue. You know, the kids have to fend for themselves for a while and figure out, you know, how to buy
pretty much this movie's like Dark Home Alone 2 Lost in New York.
Yeah, they end up going into the city, end up Boston, I think, at some point. And so so you saw this in the theater when it came out. Did you this is Sei Shun, I believe, is the director of this?
Yes, it's his debut feature. He built it off a short that submitted at Sundance, and then from there he was able to get like funding, and the script also was in the screenwriters lab, and I think from there it's a Sundance release.
Nice. Yeah, this one was good. This is a more I don't know what the term I want to use is. Like it's a more like rough, not rough, but like unpolished camera, you know.
Yeah, lens. It's definitely a micro budget film. Yeah. Like a lot of it you could tell is run and gun. Like my ex was in it because she answered a Craigslist ad for looking for parts for it. So to give you some idea of the production. Well, I mean, it's what it lacks in polish, it makes up for in heart. Yeah. I mean, as trite as that is to say, like you feel that. This is pretty much the epitome of like a post-recession movie, but to look at it through the lens of like, an immigrant whose status is unsure in this country on top of everything else going on. You got to compound that worry on top of like everyone else's like housing insecurity and financial insecurity.
Yeah. And there is that all that heart, like this is another one that's a little bit of a heartbreaker because you see, the mother in this struggling. What's her? Sorry, Elaine. Elaine, I believe is Elaine is her name in this. Played by Cindy Chung, and she is just trying so hard and just can't like catch a freaking break. And you see like her kids kind of how they're dealing with it. Like they don't necessarily know everything that's going on, but they know enough. And you see them like start to act out in little ways and things like that. Just natural stuff for kids.
Yeah, especially with the older son who is kind of like who's sick of it because he sees this pattern going on and he's just like, he wants to be like a 12-year-old boy, but he's also got to like, because the father's also not part of the picture, he's got to be the man in the family and help raise his sister. And they tell the sister sweet little fibs. It's like, oh, daddy's like in Providence when he's really back in Hong Kong. And it's like, oh, we can't have the house right now, even though they've been evicted.
Right.
And it's like, your heart breaks. Is like, you see why they do what they do, but it's like, what else? What would you do in that situation? Like, what would you tell her?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's rough to watch and it's rough to experience and be in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to catch my notes on this because I have all these just little notes for everything. So,
I guess like, I'll go. Oh, I was going to say, like, it's interesting rewatching this because I feel like at the time I watched it, I wasn't as savvy about MLM, which is like multi-level marketing, as I think people are now. Like, I think there's more of an awareness. It's like, you buy all these products and then you try to get 3 other people and then they get 3 other people. Yeah. And then it's like your downline, like all those terms. At the time I watched it, wasn't familiar, but like in the years since, when you hear like there's been like podcasts, there's that show on Showtime on becoming a god in South Florida, where it talks specifically about these types of scams. It's like you're just so much more aware now. So when you're watching this movie, it's like a horror movie. It's like you see them say those exact language, like you got to get your downline here. I'm like, no, walk away.
Don't go into the scam. Yeah.
Right. Like she clears out her finances, like everything that she has saved up to that point just to be a part of it. And then the movie talks about like the insidiousness because like she is a Chinese immigrant. It's like, oh, you can help with our Chinese market because you can speak Mandarin and try to recruit these. And it's just like this like further exploitation of people going on. And it's like, there's like a world, the world this movie inhabits. It's like, it just kind of expands beyond who you see on screen and like who's being affected. And which is how we all were in like 2008 post crash.
True. I mean, like it reminds me a bit of like if you remember when we were in high school, like Cutco is like all the rage, man.
Oh yeah,
and it reminds me of that. They were trying to get like high school kids to sell Cutco knives to all their and whatnot. Like, yeah,
exactly. Like this bullshit just gets to fester. I remember in college, like somebody like, oh, just come to this little party, it's fine. And then someone like, free food, sure, why not? And all of a sudden it's like, wait, why is there like a whiteboard up? It's like, what did I walk into?
Why is the door locked? I can't leave.
Like everyone's been approached and they get really aggressive. And then now you know why they get really aggressive. It's like, oh shit, they're like $5,000 in the hole. It's like they need somebody else.
Freaking
I only found this out recently that the whole MLM scheme was also from Charles Ponzi, who obviously with like the Ponzi scheme that led to the 2008 crash, and it's just like motherfucker.
I was not a cool guy. Not a cool guy.
That's the nicest thing you could say.
Yeah. All right, man. So that's Children of Invention. I don't know if you have anything else on that one, or if you want to move on.
That's like out of all the titles on this list, because it's also like the most micro budget, and I saw it in theaters. I don't think it got like the widest release afterwards too, so it's a little bit harder to find, but I think it's really well worth it.
Yeah. Was that the one? I forget if we were talking. Was that the one that I found on? I think it's on IMDB.
Right.
Streaming. So if you're looking for it, check out IMDB streaming, which has a bunch of pretty decent movies on there. Unfortunately, you got to deal with commercials. It's free, so suck it up.
You can't complain too much.
Yeah, exactly. So what's our next one?
All right, next one is from 2006. It is Mirindis, The Namesake. It's based on Jhumpa Lahiri's novel. It talks about like this family from India coming over and like the assimilation process, and like, you know, it really speaks to issues between like immigrant parents and first generation kids, and like that tension that can develop about like, you know, wanting to fit into American society in terms of like retaining a lot of the culture from the motherland and everything. It's like, you know, me, I'm not specifically Indian, but like I could relate to that story with like my mother is an immigrant from that country. You feel like a lot of the conversations that the characters have, it felt very relatable to how it was growing up in my household with my mother and grandmother as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is I you know, obviously I don't have the Asian American part of it, but like my grandmother was from Hungary, and like you had kind of the same thing where like you have friends over or whatever, and uh, you kind of realize that you're like steeping them in like another type of culture, or like like
Mm-hmm.
they're like, oh, I don't get this, or and you kind of have to explain to them, or whatever, or treat it however you're gonna treat it. Like obviously Cal Penn in this movie goes about it in several different ways,
Oh yeah.
depending
By
on
the
what
way,
stage
this
of
is
life
his
he's in.
first dramatic role too.
Yeah, shortly after Harold and Kumar.
Very shortly after, yeah. And I think he holds himself well in it too, very much so.
Yeah, I think he does a great job. But this one really kept my interest. I think it's a pretty long movie too, right? It's like 2 hours, 10.
It's like, yeah, just a little over 2 hours. I mean, yeah, this is the only movie too that's also not a debut film. And I think that it's also the one with the biggest budget. Like it is a mid-budget actual studio release from a boutique version of 20th Century Fox. I forget what I mean, they don't even exist anymore now because they got swallowed up by Disney, whatever their
Right.
indie house was called. But what did I want to say about it? Just had a train of thought. Sorry.
No, that's all right. You caught me. I was just trying to see if I could find quickly who the studio was, or the sub studio was, but I don't.
Right, of 20th Century Fox. I mean, yeah, they're not even in existence anymore.
Yeah.
But to like, I think what was so quietly also groundbreaking when this movie first came out in 2006, like this is also before something like Aziz Ansari's Master of None, which really talked about like Indian immigration head on. This is like one of the first American movies to really like in a somewhat respectable studio budget actually address this head on, to see like that culture represented so vibrantly on screen.
Yeah.
Mira Nair is I mean, she's an Indian filmmaker, but she was educated in America. So her movies, she goes like back and forth between the two countries. The movie she did right before this was an adaptation with Vanity Fair that starred Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, nice.
And she was just partly inspired to do this movie. She was friends with the author of the novel. And also in real life, her parents had passed away in a country they weren't born in. And as she was reading the novel, like that's an incident that also happens. So you have that like kind of alienated displacement feeling too. And she wanted like, you know, she felt really moved to like work it out on screen too, to like also translate it in this movie.
Yeah, I love the there is that the death that I think you're talking about is like kind of, it's removed from his country of birth, but also removed from his family at the time, and like
Oh yeah,
separated.
the double isolation.
Yeah, so that's like a really impactful scene. But I really love like the intergenerational aspect of this. You get to see Cal Penn's Gogol's parents growing up, the reason he gets growing up, or like getting to know each other at least briefly in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is all really quickly to interject. This is one of the first representations of like a somewhat arranged marriage I think I've seen on screen too. That wasn't done in like a jokey, haha, trapped way, but like a very grounded one that happened to work out for the better. And that like it's still the case for a lot of couples like that.
Yeah.
So I can imagine how gratifying that was to see represented on screen as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but it is like, you see that, and then you see him grow up, and you see how different he is because he's born in America,
right?
And how different he is from his parents, but also how tethered to them, he still is at the same time. And I just love that, going through all this. And, there's a lot of great moments in this that kind of speak to that. You're like trying to match your definition of yourself as an American to
Right.
the definition of yourself as your parents, like having to do with your parents, like as an Indian American and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I think that all really comes through really well in this, and Cal Penn does a great job, and in his first dramatic role.
Right. Like you're really caught between two worlds. And I think the movie does a good job of establishing that with his parents. Like his mother, played by this great Indian actress, her name's Taboo, who she's considered like the Meryl Streep of India, just been in like hundreds and hundreds of movies. Like her meeting the father, played by Irfan Khan, who sadly passed away, but he's made a lot of movies both in Bollywood and Hollywood. Like he was in Slumdog Millionaire, he was even in Rise of Planet of the Apes, I think also Jurassic World. But yeah, he's been in like tons of like everything from like blockbusters to indies. And you see like their tentative relationship on top of like coming over to this country and trying to get situated. Like you see her, while she has to be home alone while he's studying, she makes a snack out of like Rice Krispies and this spice, and she pulls nuts out because it's like a taste of home. Like she tries to get like all these like little bits of home, to be in her household while she's in this like very alien foreign place to her.
Yeah.
And then the disconnect that she feels with her kids, who are just so Americanized, like, rocking out to Pearl Jam, talking back with disrespect. And she's just like, I've given birth to strangers. It just is like, I feel that line so much. When I hear like, my aunts and uncles talk about my cousins or something like that too. I think, yeah, like a lot of immigrants can relate to that type of like disconnect you have with your folks.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is such a great, line way to, portray that in like 2 seconds. Like,
right.
Such a,
because you get it. It hits so close to the bone.
Absolutely. Yeah, man, it's a good one. It's a very good one. I appreciate you sending that one along. And well, we've got one more that you suggested to me. I know that you have like your own stories about this one, just like outside of the movie itself. But
you make those stories sound way more interesting than they actually are.
But why don't you introduce this one
sure.
for us?
This one is 2002's Better Luck Tomorrow. I mean, this movie is kind of like, I know it sounds like hyperbole to call it like a game changer, but it really is. It's like the first time that a lot of Asian Americans in my generation felt themselves seen on screen in a way that was so three-dimensional and like well-rounded and honest. It's just about, it's like a high school movie. It's like a very stylized high school movie with like gangster elements, but it's so free of just stereotypes and like all these other like preconceived notions that people have towards Asian Americans. It just gets them let to be and tell their own story. And just watching it, when I saw it in the theater, like to me, that was like when I first saw Jurassic Park, just jaw dropped. And I was just remember being so grateful that it existed. And I saw it at like Montgomery Theater right when it came out in 2002. I was like 19 years old. And I, like all throughout college, just like try to show all my other Asian friends, it's like we'd pass it around like a mixtape, and I'd have some friends who'd like respond so favorably, like they'd like, can we just watch that again? Like right afterwards. I'm like, well, I don't see why not. Like play it again. And that's awesome. It's so interesting to watch it now, because so removed, because it's like a thing, in a weird way to say, from my childhood, just like, probably almost 2 decades removed from it, but to watch it again with everything that's happened since then, watching it, I get to like experience the feelings I had the first time and appreciate it on a whole new level now of what it means. Because I think during this pandemic, with like the heightened attacks and harassments against Asians, to really see a movie, even though it came out pre-pandemic, obviously, of just Asians being free, of just, being carefree not giving a fuck. It just felt so gratifying. I got to appreciate it on a whole new level now of like everything that's happened since then.
Yeah, man. It's I think I texted you and I was like, God, it's nice to just see these dudes just being badass, high school. It's basically like Goodfellas high school version, but it's so weird. Like I was reading some reviews about this, and one of them was like, "Where the hell are all the parents?" There's like zero parents in this movie.
Right.
They're just all allowed to like be gangsters and shit. Like it is like, but it's fucking it's awesome. It's like my teenage self would have loved this movie.
Right. I mean, but you say the same thing during like almost any movie about teens. Like think of all the slasher movies. Where are the parents? Meanwhile, there's like a serial killer loose in the town and no one knows.
Everybody's allowed to go out to parties, I guess, when serial killers are just murdering people.
Right. Yeah. So you have that fantasy element. But I think even like when you mentioned about like the Goodfellas, because it's like, the style of the movie in 2002, it's a very post 90s, like, Danny Boyle, Darren Aronofsky, like very flashy, stylized, like a sub Scorsese. The movie is shot in a way I think these characters view themselves, but I think the movie also does a good job of like having scenes where they get checked on that.
Yeah.
Like there's a scene in the movie where, they're getting a bit of a rep, like this like gang of like high school friends, and they're at this party, and like some fucking white jock just comes and steps on them, and then like a fight breaks out. And I remember thinking like, oh, great, he's going to do some like stupid kung fu movie. Like, yeah, he kicks his ass, but it's like, how many times have we seen that? Like, of course, he would know martial arts. But instead, the movie pulls a 180 and he just fucking pistol whips him. I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Which was so satisfying in the moment. But then, like, right after that, they're in the car and you just see the looks on their faces like, what the fuck did we just do?
Yeah.
And you see like, the jubilation really give way to like, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me. I'm going to go to juvie. And it's like, it really checks them. And on top of that kind of like, reversal in the car next to them, like these dudes think they're like hardcore, they're hot shit. There's like a Filipino gang with like an Uzi that is just like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And it's like, they're like, they can't even make eye contact, these like preppy high schoolers. So it also puts them in their place.
Yeah. Right away.
Like it really like, I think the movie does a good job of like calling them on their bullshit too. Like one of the dudes gives the guy a gun, and they're like on this beach under this boardwalk, and someone just tries to like do some move in the air, and the way they all scatter on the sand, just is like, you guys are idiots. This is pretty much. But like the movie knows it.
Yeah.
So like, even though the style, it's like, I think it's like dated in the best way. Like it's really of a piece of the time it came out, and some of the language, like the homophobic and ableist slurs, it's like that's how everyone was talking. I think the movie, it still holds a real special place in my heart.
Yeah.
And I was glad to see it hold up. Like the director, Justin Lin, has gone on to do such amazing things. Like, I mean, besides like getting his big name with the Fast and the Furious movies, of which the character Han in this has been confirmed to be a part of the universe.
Nice.
Which I can't blame him for. It's like, shit, these movies make $1 billion. Why wouldn't you say, oh, go check out my first feature too? Because one of the guys is in it. He directed episodes of TV. Like, I mean, we don't have to talk about season 2 of True Detective. He's not the reason it sucked, but he also worked on Community. He did the 3 episodes the first season, and one of them was the Modern Warfare episode of Community, which was the paintball episode. So it's like he really established a template of what that show was capable of doing.
Yeah. And we'd probably say most people's favorite episode of Community to this day, probably.
Right. Like he's got such a great, like, eye for camera movement and like editing. Like he's got the full, he's got the chops. He's like a natural born filmmaker. And the budget of this movie was like half of what Napoleon Dynamite cost, which was like $400,000-$500,000. But when you look at Better Luck Tomorrow, it looks like it could easily be an $8 to $10 million movie, which I know doesn't sound like that much of a compliment, but when you see the polish that he's able to apply with the lack of resources, like he really made the most of it. Funny story. He was part of this like networking function while he was trying to get the movie funded, and at that function also as like a guest spot was MC Hammer. And he was talking to him about this movie, and he was able to make that connection with MC Hammer. And then, like, time goes by, he's trying to find funders, and he gets the classic story. It's like, oh, we'd give you this much money if you just, made it about white guys. And he's like, pass, clearly.
Yeah.
he reached out to MC Hammer, who wrote him a check for $10,000 to complete the movie. So like MC Hammer is like a little it was for Justin Lin. Like he was able to really, complete that. And he made really the most of it. Yeah.
So MC Hammer, one of the funders of this movie.
MC Hammer is the reason Better Luck Tomorrow exists.
An angel investor. An angel investor.
He was too legit to not donate.
That's true. Oh man.
But, yeah.
That's a cool story. I did not know that.
And like another thing too, I guess. I mean, I could go on and on, gush about this movie. Like the love interest of the movie, I will give that she's not as well developed as the male characters because it's a cishet male writer, but she has her own little like arc and stuff going on. She is Chinese American, but she's adopted, and like you see her home life, like she's got this very like Caucasian sounding last name. And you see the disconnect, and we see her family. I just remember showing it to like some of my Asian female friends who are also adopted, and I'm just trying to think like, where else have you seen not just like an Asian character, let alone an Asian character that was also adopted in a transracial adoption? Just like how rare that was, and how gratifying that also to have like someone on screen represent your situation as well. Yeah.
I mean, that's it is it's all about kind of. I'm happy when I can see like other people being represented because I obviously have gotten that all my life, and I'm like it's cool when you can like really enjoy a good movie and see yourself in it. Like it's cool to see a good movie no matter what, right?
Right.
But when you can see yourself in there, or like you see like you grew up wanting to be a filmmaker, Morgan, like when you see other folks who have blazed the trail, and it helps everybody to have more diversity, to have more to show the way other people live or express their art. I mean
it's really inspiring to see that it is possible, it is attainable. And it's like I know with my own work, and it's like, well, who I try to like cast in like my projects with like my shorts and music videos, so like who's able to like who I want to see represented on screen, and like who wants to like be the lead of that story, and whose narratives I want to like share and tell. And just the specificity in this movie too, like just pieces of dialogue. I feel like you joke around, like they go like, oh, who do you think you are, Chow Yun Fat? And it's like that's such a line strictly for the Asian audiences, because it's like like how many like white people who aren't Quentin Tarantino know who Chow Yun Fat is, like starring in all the John Woo flicks, who's like one of the biggest action stars on the planet, but in the Western Hemisphere is so just like not even on their radar, who unfortunately tried to get like an American action hero role at the same time with like Jet Li and Jackie Chan, but it just for whatever reason, well, I mean, there's obvious reasons in terms of like how we treat Asian male actors, but it wasn't able to like, land that stardom here.
Man, you're right. I was gonna say, like, the only reason in high school that I knew who Chow Yun Fat was, again, was because of you showing me movies that he was in. Like, I remember watching like what was one of the first, like Hard Boiled, and like I forget, but like The
Killer. And I think the title too, Better Luck Tomorrow, is a play on John Woo's movie A Better Tomorrow, which was like his first vehicle with Chow Yun Fat, where he really established his like heroic bloodshed, a very stylized like action gunfighting choreography.
Yeah, man. All right, so that's our rundown of the movies that you suggested. I was looking at this list, and I was like, this is a great list, but I wonder what kind of Filipino American movies are out there, because Morgan, you're Filipino American. We've had conversations about kind of what that means to you when we're going to high school together, and since I've known you, and I was like, oh man, I would love to see what kind of stuff is out there. So I found like basically the big one that everybody talks about when you look into this is The Debut. And I was like, I think I texted you like last week. I was like, I'm just gonna watch this. We don't like we can talk about it if you don't have time or whatever. Like whatever. But I was like, I want to give you a heads up, and I was like, have you? And like stupidly, I was like, Morgan, have you seen this movie? And you're like, of course I've fucking seen that movie. So
the innocence of youth, Steve.
Yeah,
the
exactly. Like, what
youth.
was I thinking? It was like, how do I phrase this without like, assuming that you've seen it, but knowing you probably have.
Right, because then it's like I could turn around and be that asshole. Oh, why? You thought I saw it because I'm Filipino?
Yeah, exactly.
You peopling that me.
But yeah, so I was like, I'm gonna check this out. It's got Rufio in it. So it's got
Dante Bosco.
Dante Bosco.
I mean, he'll always be Rufio to
of course
our generation who's seen Hook.
Yeah, of course. And it's got it's directed by Gene
Kahayun.
His name
Kahayun.
Yeah. So I checked it out, and it was pretty good. You were like, I haven't seen that in years, and I don't know how it's gonna hold up. And I was like, well, I'll watch it and like see how it is. I really enjoyed it. There's like some late 90s, early 2000s, like this is that era type movie issues with it, and
of course,
a bit, like predictable in terms of like a teen angsty movie, but
the
part that speaks to the Filipino American experience, I think, is really well done and really interesting. So let me ask you, what do you like remember of this? Or like what sticks out to you after years of like not having seen it?
Well, I remember finding out about it at the time because I think I was like a freshman in college, and I was like really invested, like would follow these like blogs and websites that would deal with like race-related issues, and especially race-related issues in terms of media representation. And then they would talk about this movie. The debut is actually funny. It didn't get a proper release. It was touring. Like basically, not too many prints were made. There wasn't like an official wide release. There would be like a few select, almost roadshow type things set up all over the country because the filmmaker's based in the either Bay Area or LA. I forget what. I know he's California based. So he would tour the film would tour the country, and then it's almost like a band, like coming soon to you.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay. It's got Dante Bosco. It's like from a Filipino American writer, director, and it's about such like a culturally specific thing. For context, by the way, a debut is almost the Filipino version of like a quinceañera or a sweet 16. It's not a girl's 18th birthday. It's like a big celebration of like welcoming her into womanhood. So you already have like that. That's like really not such like a widely known topic or theme to like audiences that aren't in that specific culture. So to have that like scene, it's like, all right, I got to see like what's going to be represented. Like, I mean, I got to see like what's going to be in this movie and everything. I mean, I was able to get tickets to the Garden State Theater, and it was sold out. And you probably every Filipino, well, not every Filipino, because that would clearly fill up an entire fucking skyscraper, but basically
everyone that could get tickets.
Yes, every seat was packed. We're probably from all over the tri-state area, and you would have thought it was like Filipino Rocky Horror Picture Show, because it's just like. When the film, I remember it being a joke when Dante Bosco, I don't even remember the character's name.
What the hell is his name? Ben?
Ben, yes.
Ben Mercado.
Ben Mercado, thank you. Like he has his white friends come over. And then it's like, they're seeing the ornaments and the decorations with like the giant wooden utensils. Like everyone is just like laughing because it's like, oh, Tita Benet has that shit in her wall and everything like that. So you see that, like, hell, I remember, like, when you guys would come over and like Lola would be around. I'm like, oh god, please don't do anything embarrassing, which is a shitty attitude to have.
Of course, but that's how everybody feels about their grandparents and their kids.
Everyone, exactly.
And it's Lola was a delight. She was amazing.
So. Yeah, I know. I seriously do think about her, like, probably once a day, every day, especially having a kid and wishing she could be there. But anyways, back to the debut.
Yeah,
I dragged my friend Edgardo, who's also Filipino, to go see that, and it was just like a blast. It's like the jokes. It's like a FUBU movie. It's like it's so specifically tailored to that audience. It's almost like Gene wasn't trying to like actually attract white people to watch this movie at all.
But you know what? Like
it's relatable. It's relatable.
It's a teen party movie, basically.
Right.
You know? It's got all those elements. It's got like the scene where they play basketball. It's got the scene where they get into a fight with the dickhead that you've been waiting to get him to get into a fight with the whole movie.
Sure. You have the fight with the parents and everything like that. And it was beautifully rendered. And at the time, I mean, that came out probably a year before Better Luck Tomorrow, which had such like, I mean, Better Luck Tomorrow was like an MTV Films release. So that obviously had like the distribution platform to like be seen by such a wider number of people. But the debut was, it's like the little movie that could. And I remember like, it was a very special feeling, like to be able to be in a crowd that was so appreciative and starved for something like that. Like there's been such a hunger for so long for these types of stories, these types of movies. And now the artists actually have the means of having it out there. And now we get to see it. And it's like culminated with like Minari being nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. It's like these movies walked so these later movies could run. And it's kind of like they were like their like really scrappy budgets, having MC Hammer be like an angel investor or touring the country at these like very select niche theaters to like get to this point that we're at. And it's really interesting to see the lineage. It feels it's great that it's finally happened, but sad that it took like the 21st century for it to like actually become a thing that it is. Because it's like I try to think before the debut, like what's out there. And there was this one movie that I don't even think there's even prints of it anymore. I remember when I was working at Hollywood Video, it came out in 98. It's called Yellow. It's another Asian American high school party movie, but it never got even a tour. It was a festival release out west, and Hollywood Video had this deal to like help distribute these movies that, they could buy cheaply, give them like a direct-to-video release, but they had no hopes of ever seeing a theatrical screen. And I remember watching that so long ago. The filmmaker behind it was Chris Chanley, and it actually stars like Baby John Cho in it as well as one of the high schoolers.
I think what's his name, Justin Tobin's in it as well, or Jason Tobin. Sorry, I saw that when I was doing a little bit of research. I was like, oh wow, like I wonder how far back I can find a movie that like has this kind of representation.
Right,
and that was one of the ones that came up.
Yeah, they're out there, but at the time, it's like, outside of these like niche audiences, like how are people supposed to really like find that media?
Yeah,
and it's funny, like just also speaking of John Cho, just how many? I mean, he appears twice on this list, but you look at the lineage of like Asian American movies, he's on there. He's put his time in. And I always thought like right before Better Luck Tomorrow, which really gave him like a larger role. Before that, he is the only actor besides Mina Suvari to be in both American Pie and American Beauty.
Nice. So he's got the American part down.
He's the all-American guy. Yep. It was really gratifying too. Like around the time of Columbus, there was like this meme going on called like, starring John Cho, where people were really trying to make him, a larger A-lister figure. So they were like photoshopping his face on top of like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. But it's like, oh yeah, why couldn't John Cho be like a fucking badass spy like that? And he's great.
Treasure, man. He's great.
He's an absolute delight.
He has been in such a wide variety of types of movies, and he continues to like crush all of them,
And he's been really at the forefront. Like I know it didn't make the list, but it's only because it wasn't from an Asian American filmmaker. But like a movie like Harold and Kumar, like a stupid stoner movie that everyone takes for granted. But like, that was another thing after Better Luck Tomorrow, to see this kind of like, okay, it's like you can have this movie that's non-stereotypical with two Asian leads who kind of like, thumb their noses at the kind of like societal expectations of how Asians are supposed to be. And I think this script is really knowing, because I've seen Harold and Kumar like a bunch of times too all throughout college. but the way that movie opens, it follows like two white guys in like corporate suits in this building, and they're just like bullshit, like, "Hey, Chad," or whatever, like, "What are you gonna do this weekend?" "Nothing much." "Oh, I got all this work to do." "Oh, give it to, Harold." And like, you love, like, those people are so studious. And then like the camera follows them as they go on their little adventure, but then the camera zooms back to John Cho's face, and it just is like, fuck. So it's like any other movie would have picked up on the two white guys, and that would have been the whole thread.
Yeah.
And then the Asian guy would just be like the punchline of a joke, but then it's like almost like a record scratch. It goes back to him.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's going to be his movie. So it has that like awareness of like what it holds in society, of like what has came before and how it's going to flip the script on that.
Yeah, I really gotta go back and watch that, at least the first one again, because it's been a long time. And
I would have picked that too if it wasn't for Danny Lerner, whose other movie was like Dude, Where's My Car? And it's like, he's fine for what it is, but I really wanted to highlight with this list, like, stories starring Asian Americans, but like also created, written, directed by Asian Americans too.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that this list is mwah. Anybody, I highly suggest everybody go out and watch all these movies.
Oh, thank you so much, man.
So well done. I think you showed a lot, like you said in the beginning, you were trying to put a bunch of movies on this list that were not similar to each other, that kind of show the wide range of kind of the types of art and film that comes out of, the Asian American community. And these are all great places to, if you're going to start a journey into watching some more Asian American cinema, these are all great places to start.
Or just like expand your horizon and see like, other experiences and perspectives. Like, I mean, even besides like a list like this, like I just remember growing up watching foreign movies, and not even just necessarily like Asian foreign movies, but just to get like the experience of travel or see something from a new point of view, and just like really build empathy for like other cultures or experiences that aren't your own.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wild. Like the first time, when you're a kid catching a foreign movie and seeing like, oh, that's weird how other people live, and then kind of like getting engrossed in that like whole world and learning kind of who these people are through not only who the characters are on screen, but like who the director is and like who the writer is through their characters and stuff like that. So I always found that really interesting to watch like foreign films, because they're, every country or everyone has their own like styles that are big or that get notoriety. Like American cinema is different than European cinema, is different than Asian cinema, is different than, whatever. And it's really great to go through and get into that, and then kind of get into like the differences. All right, so we're talking about like, if we're talking about like Asian American cinema, like, all right, we're not talking about Asian American cinema, we're talking about like Indian American cinema, we're talking about like Chinese American cinema.
Oh yeah, really get into like the nuances and like the cultures, because like once you get over that like large umbrella, like, because Asian America, that's already like a term that like, well, what do you mean by that? Yeah. Because there's so much that's encompassed by it, and I think each of these movies is like representative of a slice of that. That it's not one monolith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's one last point I really want to bring up too, talking about empathy. Like Roger Ebert did call cinema empathy machines, and another thing, I bring him up because when Better Luck Tomorrow premiered at Sundance, like before people were like live streaming or blogging their reactions, there was this Q&A where someone accused Justin of like, how dare you have such negative representation of your people? And then Roger Ebert like got up front, because he was in the crowd. It wasn't even called on. He just got up and goes like, what are you talking about? Like, people could like tell whatever stories they want. Like, they don't have to be one thing. It's like, negative representation doesn't exactly equate to the like entirety of the experience.
Yeah.
And it was just like very heated back and forth. And because like Roger Ebert, who did give it like 4 stars in his review, was so passionate about the movie, like, defending it on top of like the content of the movie, like a producer at MTV Films saw that and made Justin Lin an offer to distribute that. So it's like Roger Ebert is another figure of like how we were able to see how Better Luck Tomorrow was able to get like a wider platform and distribution as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great little story, man. Unfortunately, we are running a little low on time, so we got to wrap up. But if you have anything else you want to say or anything, I don't know if you have anything to plug going on right now or anything like that, but now's the time, man.
I just try to enjoy the rest of my AAPI month. Going to try to watch more stories and movies from stuff I haven't seen. Like, you know, even last year with release of Minari, a couple other movies that are on Netflix. Tiger Tail is one that's worth checking out from Alan Yang, one of the co-creators of Master of None. Also deals with like a Taiwanese immigrant experience. And another one, a movie called The Half of It by Alice Wu, which is like a really delightful high school movie that's kind of like a high school take on Cyrano de Bergerac, where the lead is an Asian American girl.
Oh, shit. Nice. All right. I'll have to add some couple movies to my list here. All right,
yeah,
man. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, do you want to say something else?
Yeah, I was going to say just use this list as like, I feel like a good starting point and see like what other works the creators or the actors or writers have been in and try to like, you know, expand on that and just try to see as much as you can. I feel like support the community, support the creators.
Yeah, absolutely. Wise words, my friend.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Anyway, Morgan, thank you so much for joining us again. As always, it's great having you on, great talking movies with you, and I hope to do so hopefully in person at some point soon.
I know.
Vaxxed up.
Gotta live that vaxxed life in person, man.
That's
can't
right.
wait. I really can't wait to catch up. Seriously.
Yeah, dude. So we'll do something soon. But in the meantime, stay well, and I will talk to you later, man.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?